Hi, this is Mrs. Chavez. We're still in Chapter 1, The Peopling of the World, and today we're going to be starting Section 2, Humans Trying to Control Nature. By about 40,000 years ago, human beings had become fully modern in their physical appearance. With a shave, a haircut, and a suit, a Cro-Magnon man or woman would have looked like a modern business person. However, over the following thousands of years, the way of life of early humans underwent incredible changes. People developed new technology, artistic skills, and most importantly, agriculture. Early modern humans quickly distinguished themselves from their ancestors who had spent most of their time just surviving, hunting for food, looking for calories. As inventors and artists, more advanced humans stepped up to the pace of cultural change. For tens of thousands of years, men and women of the Old Stone Age were nomads. Nomads were highly mobile people. They moved from place to place, foraging, picking grains, and searching for new sources of food, and also hunting. Nomadic groups whose food supply depend on hunting animals and collecting plant foods are called hunter-gatherers. Prehistoric hunter-gatherers, such as the roving bands of Cro-Magnon, increased their food supply by inventing tools. For example, hunters crafted special spears that enabled them to kill game at a greater distance. Getting up close and personal with a woolly mammoth would be quite dangerous. So they had to develop tools that would allow them to bring down this large prey from a further distance. Digging sticks also helped the food gatherers to pry the plants loose at the roots. Early modern humans had launched a technological revolution. Of course, they did not know that, but when we look back on this in history, we could say this was a revolution in technology. They used stone, they used bone, and wood to fashion more than 100 different tools. So these expanded toolkits included knives to kill and butcher game, and fish hooks and harpoons to catch larger fish. A chisel-like cutter was designed to make other tools. So Cro-Magnon used bone needles to sew clothing and made animal hides also. The tools of early modern humans explain how they met their survival needs. When you look at their tools, you can understand how they were able to survive in their environment. Yet their world best springs to life through their artistic creations. Necklaces of seashells, lion teeth, bear claws adorned both men and women. People ground mammoth tucks into polished beads. They also carved small, realistic sculptures of animals that inhabited their world. Stone Age peoples on all continents created cave paintings. And the best known of these, of course, are the paintings on the walls and ceilings of European caves, mainly in France and Spain. Here, early artists drew lifelike images of wild animals. Cave artists made colored paints from charcoal and mud and animal blood. In Africa, Australia, and North America, early artists engraved pictures on rocks or painted scenes in caves or rock shelters. You can go down to Hueco Tanks and see some of the rock drawings from early North American natives. In Australia, they created paintings on large rocks also. For thousands upon thousands of years, humans survived by hunting game and gathering these edible plants. They lived in bands of 25 to 70 people at the most. The men almost certainly did all the hunting, and the women, of course, gathered fruits and berries and roots and grasses. That's why when we say that women brought in 70% of the calories, hunting can be very dangerous, but it also may not work out for you. You may go after an animal to hunt it down and you may not succeed. The animal may get away. But when you're picking different types of edible plants to be able to eat, or grains that you can eat, it's going to be much more reliable. So about 10,000 years ago, some of the women may have scattered seeds near a regular campsite that they come, a yearly migration, okay? And when they returned the next season, they found new crops were growing. This discovery would usher in the Neolithic Revolution, or agricultural revolution, the far-reaching changes in human life resulting from the beginning of farming. Farming was an accident. It was accidental, believe it or not. The shift from food gathering to food producing culture represents one of the greatest achievements in human history. Scientists don't know exactly why the agricultural revolution occurred during this period of time. They think that it could be caused because of the changing climate. That was probably the key reason. Rising temperatures worldwide provided longer growing season and drier land for cultivating those wild grasses. A rich supply of grain helped support a small population boom. As populations slowly rose, hunter-gatherers felt pressure to find new food sources. Farming offered an attractive alternative. Unlike hunting, it provided a steady source of food. Some groups practiced slash and burn farming, in which they cut trees or grasses and burned them to clear a field. The ashes that remained fertilized the soil. Farmers planted crops for a year or two and then moved to another area of land, and the whole process starts all over again. After several years, trees and grass grew back, and other farmers repeated the process. Now, slash and burn was a very good way of beginning farming, and it's a very good way of farming land in a forest where there's a lot of trees that you can bring down. But it's not a good and sustainable way of farming when there are a lot of people and the land is not allowed to regrow and come back. Food gatherers' understanding of plants probably spurred the development of farming. Meanwhile, hunters' expert knowledge of wild animals likely played a key role in domestication or taming of the animals. They tamed horses and dogs and goats and pigs. Like farming, domestication of animals came slowly. Stone Age hunters may have driven herds of animals into rocky ravines to be slaughtered. It was then a small step to drive herds into human-made enclosures. From there, farmers could keep the animals as a constant source of food and gradually tame them. Not only farmers domesticated animals, pastoral nomads or wandering herders tended sheep and goats and camel or other animals. These herders moved their animals to new pastures and watering holes on an annual basis. They followed the seasons. Today, the eroded and barren rolling hills foothills of the Zagros Mountains in northeastern Iraq seem an unlikely site for the birthplace of agriculture. It actually looks very similar today as El Paso. According to archaeologists, though, Robert Braidwood, who's an archaeologist, thousands of years ago, the environmental conditions of this region were very favorable for the development of agriculture. So along that latitude line, wild wheat and barley, along with wild goats and pigs and sheep and horses, had once thrived near the Zagros Mountains. So in 1950s, Braidwood led an archaeological dig at a site called Jarmo. He concluded that an agricultural settlement was built there about 9,000 years ago. The Jarmo farmers and others like them in places as far apart as Mexico and Thailand pioneered a new way of life. Villages such as Jarmo marked the beginning of a new era and laid the foundation for modern life. This changeover from hunting and gathering to farming and herding took place not once, but many times. Neolithic peoples in many parts of the world independently developed agriculture, as the map here that you're looking at shows you. Within a few thousand years, people in many other regions, especially in fertile river valleys, turned to farming. Africa, the Nile River Valley developed into an important agricultural center for growing wheat and barley and other crops. In China, about 8,000 years ago, farmers along the middle stretches of the Huanghe, that's the Yellow River, cultivated a grain called millet. About 1,000 years later, farmers first domesticated wild rice in the Changjiang River Delta, that's in the south. Mexico and Central American farmers cultivated corn, beans, and squash. In Peru, farmers in the Central Andes were the first to grow tomatoes and sweet potatoes and white potatoes. From these early and varied centers of agriculture, farming then spread to the surrounding regions. In 1958, archaeologists discovered the agricultural village now known as Catalhayuk, or it's called the Forked Mound. It was located on a fertile plain in south-central Turkey, about 30 miles from modern-day Konya, near a twin-cone volcano. Now, Catalhayuk covered an area of about 32 acres. And at its peak, about 8,000 years ago, the village was home to 5,000 to 6,000 people who lived in about 1,000 different buildings. These rectangular-shaped houses were made of mud brick and were arranged side by side like a honeycomb. Catalhayuk showed the benefits of settled life. Its rich, well-watered soil produced large crops of barley and wheat and peas, and villagers also raised sheep and cattle. Catalhayuk agricultural surpluses supported a number of highly skilled workers, such as potters and weavers. But the village was best known at the time for its obsidian products. This dark volcanic rock, called obsidian, it looks like glass, was plentiful. It was used to make mirrors and jewelry and knives for trade. Catalhayuk's prosperity also supported a varied cultural life. Archaeologists have uncovered colorful wall paintings showing animals and hunting scenes. Many religious shrines were also dedicated to the mother goddess. According to her worshippers, she controlled the supply of grain. The new settled way of life also had its drawbacks. Some of the same things that affected the hunter-gatherer settlements. Flood, fire, drought, and other natural disasters could destroy a village. Diseases such as malaria spread easily among people living closely together. Jealous neighbors, roving nomadic bands, can come and attack and loot a wealthy village like Catalhaya. Despite the problems, these permanent settlements provided their residents with opportunities for fulfillment in work, in art, and in leisure time. These urban centers would become the setting for more complex cultures in which new tools in art and crafts were created.